Hey guys, as you probably know, Japanese service is famous for being really fast and efficient, and when you go to a restaurant or a shop or anywhere else, the staff will come running up to you within a few seconds of you arriving and apologise for keeping you waiting and look after you. So very good, as you all know, Japanese service is famous for being really good. However, there is another aspect to life in Japan that requires that things be done more slowly. So what this can mean is, so in restaurants and shops the service is extremely fast, and in lots of other cases in Japan the service is extremely fast and extremely efficient. However, if you spend time in Japan, you'll find that there's other times in Japan where something that could take 5 minutes in another country might take hours here. And I'm not kidding, I'm not exaggerating. So I'll give you some examples. So in a restaurant or a convenience store or something, fast service is important. However, if you go to, for example, a jewelry shop, now a while ago I bought wedding rings in Japan, and you walk into the jewelry shop looks much the same as it does in other countries around the world. Walk into the jewelry shop and say we want to buy wedding rings, and you can actually see them through the glass, same as other countries. There's the wedding rings in the counter. There's some wedding rings under the counter there through the glass, and we want to have a look at wedding rings. Typically what they would do is usually either seat you down at where you're standing, give you seats to sit down on and give you green tea, or take you into another room. Often what they do is take you into another room and give you green tea and chat. So you're getting married. Oh, when are you getting married? Oh, that's very exciting. And if you happen to be a foreigner, of course, you get questions about that. So what country are you from, and how long have you been in Japan, and lots of questions. And what they do is they make polite conversation. And you sit and drink green tea and they make polite conversation. And it's sort of like, in a circumstance like that, because I know in most countries if you walk in and you say, I'd like to see wedding rings please, they'll say, certainly, here's wedding rings for you. Boom, boom, and they put them on the counter and you can see them. But in this case, in Japan, that's usually, in this sort of circumstance, like with buying jewelry or something, that would be considered to be rude. It would be considered to be like they were just trying to get your money from you quickly. So it's often the case here that the only polite way to do it is to have polite conversation first and then gently get to the topic, which is actually looking at wedding rings. And that's often the case here, that to come straight out and ask a direct question is considered rude. So you'll sit for 20 minutes and make polite conversation about when you're getting married and how exciting it is and what country you come from and how long you've been here and all the usual stuff. And then eventually they'll go and get some trays of wedding rings and put them on the table, and you'll look at them and say, no, there's nothing here I really like. And then you have to politely say, well, thank you very much for your time. You don't say there's nothing here I like. You just say thank you very much for your time and I really appreciate it, lots of other polite stuff, and then you politely leave. So the whole process could take 30 minutes or 45 minutes and you've achieved nothing. And then you walk into the next shop, do the same thing again. And that's often the case with sort of bigger purchases. I mean, they weren't really expensive wedding rings or anything, but just more expensive than a cup of coffee and a sandwich, So it requires a bit more. Another example is, buying a house in Japan. You see a house with a sign on it, for sale. Aha! Call up the real estate agent and say, we've seen this house with a sign on it for sale. We'd like to have a look at it, please. Now, I know in a lot of countries the real estate agent would say, wait there, I'll be there shortly, and come roaring around with a key, or phone the owner and organise an inspection for you pretty well straight away, or, later on that day, or maybe the next day at the latest, but usually fairly quickly, right? Usually, fairly soon. In Japan, not uncommon to say, I'd like to have a look inside that house, please. And they say, certainly, we'll call you back, and that's almost always the case in Japan. There's almost always, I'll call you back, because they have to go and discuss it or research it or do something. You know, I know in a lot of countries they'd say, just one moment please, they'd put you on hold, they'd go off, they'd get an answer, they'd come back and they'd give you an answer. Not here. Usually, most times you ask a company for an answer, they'll call you back. And sure enough they do. I mean, the service itself is good. The service itself is good. It's the process that's slow. It's the way it's done that is slow, and everything has to be done the way it's done. You know, nobody steps outside most people don't step outside the usual routine for how things are done. So that's how it's done. So you say, I want to see inside the house. Certainly, we'll call you back. And sure enough, 20 minutes later they call back and say, how's next Thursday? You know, a week later, we can organise to see inside a week later, because they call the owner, and the owner sort of says, well, you know, we need to prepare, because nobody here's, well, most people here aren't keen to adapt. And I mean, sorry guys, I'm generalising as always with this topic. I'm generalising. Not everybody here, of course, not everybody here is the same, but this is generally the case. So most people aren't keen to adapt quickly to what's happening. So there's always a delay. There's always a delay. Everything always moves really slowly. And I'll continue with the house example. So then finally a week later, you finally get to have a look at the house, and then, you know, you want to make an offer on it. And if you actually go to the house, then usually you have to actually meet the owners and talk to the owners, and there has to be like a bit of a discussion and a meeting and a polite conversation again, you know, rather than just walk in, walk around the house, say thank you very much, see you later, and walk away. You have to make polite conversation with the owners, and you have to, and it's sort of considered, it's considered to be polite. It's the alternative to do it the way we do it in some other countries, where you'd probably just walk into the house, oh, sorry to interrupt, walk through the house, look around, say, oh, thank you very much, see you later, bye-bye. If you did that here, it would be considered to be sort of crass. Usually, it would be considered to be crass, or it'd be considered to be brash or uncivilized or something. So you have to make the polite conversation to be considered to be, you know, doing things in a polite and civilized manner, you know, which for people that are used to doing business or doing things in other countries can be extremely frustrating, because, you know, things that should take 10 minutes or 15 minutes just take forever, you know. So if you manage to get through all the polite conversation and waiting and everything else with buying a house, and then you decide you want to get a bank loan, usually the way it works here is you go and see them, and they make polite conversation, and they give you green tea. You drink a lot of green tea when you do business in Japan, and they give you green tea, and you have more polite conversation, not about the topic, talking about the weather. I mean, business letters in Japan, often the first line in a business letter in Japan isn't regarding the purchase of the home. It's not. Usually it's something about the weather. Recently the weather has becoming cooler, and it seems that autumn is almost here, or something like that, and then they get to the point of the letter. Then they start gently talking about the topic, about the house. There's no top of the page regarding this topic. There's none of that. It's a gentle talking about the weather and then gently getting into the topic. And again, here it's considered to be the polite way to do things. But it's surprising, because, you know, Japan is famous, and Japanese people are famous for being really efficient in getting things done. I mean, if you go to the Toyota factory here and watch them put together a car, it's the most efficient, amazing thing you've ever seen. You know, it's not like GMH or one of these other factories where the guys are all standing around talking and throwing something on the car as it goes past. You know, the Japanese factories and things here, the way they get things done are super efficient. You know, and that's the case when you watch Japanese people work here to get things done, particularly when they're working as a team. They're super efficient, and that is the case. But it's outside the actual doing of the work that all this other faffing around takes place, all this other stuff. I mean, it's polite stuff, that's the way it's seen here, but for us from the outside, it can just seem like such a waste of time. You know, the amount of time from our perspective, the amount of time that gets wasted here when you're trying to get things done. I mean, I've seen meetings here, I've seen groups of people here talking about something for an hour or two, to talking about something that they need to do. There's a project, okay, we need to do this. you know, some group. The example I'm thinking of, there was a martial arts group, and they had a working bee coming up where they needed to actually do something to the dojo, you know. And so they had a meeting a few nights before it, and, you know, 12, 14 people sat there and drank green tea and chatted about what had to be done on that Saturday. And they spent maybe an hour and a half talking about it. And because there's the whole social structure with the different people of different ranks who have a bigger input and the other people who have less input, and the polite conversation. So an hour and a half or more conversation about what needed to be done. And then on the day itself, it took less than an hour, because they came together as a group, and everybody just follows the person above them. So the most senior teacher there says, do this, do this, do this, and everybody's just running around working together. There's the hive thing again, working together, and bang, and it's finished. And it was finished in less than an hour. But it had taken a meeting during the week where they talked for an hour and a half. And I'm not talking about sitting there for an hour and a half making a really good plan. There wasn't actually a lot of detail discussed. You know, it's another paradox of living in Japan. So the reason I made this video is just to let you guys know that if you do spend any time here, you're going to have to be prepared for this, because it's extremely frustrating. It is extremely frustrating when you're used to living in a country where you can buy a house, you know, in my country, in my old country, between 7 days and 30 days was usual. So from when you actually saw a house to when you actually owned it and were holding the key. You know, longer than 30 days was not usual. Within 30 days, you could be owning the house and holding the key. You know, and then you come and live in a country where it can drag on for months, because every step, there's no sense of urgency. You know, and there's no sense of urgency when it comes to this stuff. And in fact, it's the opposite. We have to look like we're being efficient, or the customer has to feel that we're being thorough. I think that's another aspect to it as well. And with the bank, you finally find a house, you go to the bank and say, okay, I want to borrow, you know, 75% of the cost of this house. You know, I have 25% deposit, I want to borrow 75%. And they sit there and they give you green tea and they make polite conversation, and then you actually tell them, I'm here because I want to buy a house. You know, that comes after the green tea. And then they get some forms, and everything's done very, very slowly, and then they explain lots of stuff to you, and it goes on, and then they complete the forms, and that takes forever. And that first meeting could take a couple of hours. And all you'll have achieved at the end of it is you might have completed maybe 2 pages of fairly simple forms. And then they say thank you very much, and you go away, and then they call you a week later and say, okay, you know, can we have another meeting because we need to get some more information from you. And that will usually happen 3 or 4 times. And then each time that piece of paper gets kicked up to the person above them, because that's the way it works here, paper and processes always have to keep going to the person above, and every time that happens, that next person will have different questions and different aspects that they have to cover, so you have to go back for another meeting and another meeting and another meeting. And you know, in most countries now you can get pre-approval for a home loan in 30 minutes, and here it could take 2 or 3 meetings and you know, a couple of hours each time, and lots of green tea, and still you don't really know if everything's going to be okay until the last minute, because nobody in the chain really has the ability to make a decision until the very end. And then there's probably some group, some small committee of people who make a decision in the end, and until that happens, it could all fall over. It could all fall over, and they could pull the pin on it. So it's sort of, the way they see it is the politeness is the most important thing, and being efficient, you know. Continuing with the house thing, I also saw a real estate agent had a real estate agent explain every page of a really thick contract, you know. And I know in most countries what they'll do is the information that they write in, they'll explain to you, but the rest of it's a standard contract, and they say this is a standard contract. If you've got any questions, you know, please tell me, or you know, show your lawyer. But no, here they'll sit there with the standard contract that's always the same contract and explain every paragraph of it for like 3 hours. You know, it takes like 2.5 hours, I think it took, and he explained every paragraph of that contract. And the way they see it is that that's being thorough. And if they don't do that, they're being negligent, or they're not looking after you, or they're not doing their job properly or something. So it goes on and on. It's, you know, not just buying houses and jewelry, but, you know, you want to rent a house, or you want to, you know, you want anything that you want to do, or if you're part of a working group, or if you're part of, I gave the example of the martial arts, the dojo, you know, that's a classic example. If you've got a group of people like that need to get something done, if they're actually doing it right, let's move all these dojo mats over there, okay, boom, and everybody will get in and do it, and it'll be done so fast. I mean, everybody works together, and boom, and it's done. Amazingly efficient. But in other circumstances, when you've got more than one person, you got more than one person somewhere doing something, there'll be just so much talking about it first, and so many meetings, and then often at the end of the meetings, I'll give you an example. Phone calls. I've had discussions with people where we've decided we wanted some information about something, and someone said, I'll phone them and find out. Okay, we wanted to find out what times these places were open and what time they did this. We had 3 or 4 questions, and this person called up, and it's exactly the same on the phone. You get this big, polite series of exchanges that goes on first before you actually get to the topic. And then you finally get to the topic, okay, I want this information, and which you don't say like that, of course. You know, I was wondering if maybe I could find out this information, if it's okay, you know. And then they'll typically talk on the phone for 30 minutes. Now in Australia, or maybe some other countries, you'd ring up, you say, hi, sorry to bother you, I was wondering if you might be able to help me. I'd like to know this, this, this and this, and they'd give you the answers, and you say, thank you very much, thanks for your time, bye-bye, and that would be considered to be quite polite enough, and the whole thing would have taken 5 minutes, and it's all good. Here, 30 minutes later, you're still having polite conversation, and you hang up the phone, and I've had people hang up the phone, I say to them, so what did we find out? And they've got half the information. And I say to them, what about the Saturday thing? Is that, oh, I don't really know. There's been, that information hasn't actually been forthcoming. Someone didn't know. And the other thing is, they won't clearly say, I don't know. They'll say something like, oh, I'm not sure, that's really difficult, or something like that. Or is it okay if we do this? And we've talked about this before. You know, make a phone call, talk for 30 minutes, ask if it's okay, is it possible to do this? Is it possible that we could do this thing? And at the end of the phone call, I say, so what's the story, is it possible? Oh, we don't really know. Because they've asked a roundabout way, they've asked if it's okay to do this thing, and the person at the other end of the phone has said, oh, it could be difficult, and so there's no real clear answer if it's possible or not. So, it's the way it is, and the reason I made this video is because this is one of the things, if you live in Japan long term, this is one of the things that you will encounter sooner or later in something that you do. You know, something like the ring thing won't be too frustrating, probably, you know, if you spend 30 minutes in that shop and 45 minutes in that shop and 45 minutes in that shop, and you still haven't found what you're looking for, and you've only been to 3 shops and it's been all afternoon. It's probably not too bad. But the bigger the thing you do, so if you're buying a coffee in a cafe, you'll love the experience, it'll be fabulous. But as you slowly increase the seriousness of what you're doing, so if you're buying a car, or you know, you're buying a more expensive item, or you're trying to rent an apartment, or you're trying to get a job, or you're trying to do something more serious, the more serious the thing is, or the more expensive the thing is, or the more complex, there's a nightmare, the more complex something is here, the more difficult it's going to be, and the more patience that will be required. And that's all we can do, and that's what they talk about here. If you talk to a Japanese person about this topic, they'll say, first thing they'll say is, it's normal. Oh, it's normal. You know, it's shogunai. It's just the way it is. It's just the way it is. You know, nobody tries to change any of this, because, you know, that would be crazy. It's just the way it is, and, you know, you don't try and change it. You just accept it. So that's the first thing they'd say, oh, it's just the way it is. And the second thing is, they'd say, is that you have to be patient. And that's something you'll notice here. If you're with your Japanese friends, and you're experiencing some situation like I've described, it's very rare to see frustration here. It's very rare to see a Japanese person getting frustrated or complaining or reacting negatively at all to any of those circumstances, because they consider it to be normal. They just accept it. And I know sometimes they do feel some frustration at some of this stuff. They do, but they won't show it, because that's considered to be negative and unnecessary and not useful and impolite and all that sort of stuff. So even if they are a little bit frustrated, they'll still be drinking the green tea and being all polite. You know, nobody tries to cut through any of that stuff, because it wouldn't be the right thing to do. So all we can do is just really be patient, and that's what's required. We just have to be incredibly patient and persevere. And so yeah. Anyway, I guess that's just a heads up. It doesn't really give you any solutions on how to deal with it. There's only one solution to deal with it, and that's to accept it and be patient. And when it happens, you'll remember this video and go, oh yeah, that's right, that guy was talking about that. That's right, that's why I'm sitting here drinking green tea for 30 minutes. So anyway, I hope somebody found that useful. More videos coming soon.